Okay, I've heard a lot of things about this game. How good can it actually be? Why is this game actually amazing? Okay, I know this may be surprising to the people who know me considering how grumpy and sarcastic I tend to be, but I love cheesy shit. I am a huge fan of stuff like the 1960s Batman and Kung Fury, but I will always have a soft spot for Power Rangers. This show was without question a huge part of my childhood, along with shows like Pokemon and the Metal Saga of Beyblade. In fact, I still do enjoy it to this very day. Obviously, some seasons are better than others, my personal recommendations being Time Force, Lost Galaxy, RPM, and Dino Thunder. The show's obviously still going, but I haven't watched it in a while. I should probably get on that. You should also rewatch those old seasons as well to see if any of them hold up as well as I remember. I'll get right on that. Okay, so I just watched the pilot episodes of each of those seasons, and yeah, the show still kicks ass. It's not every show where a high school science teacher jumps, spinning, reverse crest, and kicks a T-Rex. Anyways, on to our main topic of the day. My story with this game is an interesting one. I actually knew about this game before it even came out. You see, I have this habit of checking what's new on the Nintendo eShop every once in a while, just to see if anything catches my eye. And this game actually did, until I saw the roster size. But then I was told by a good friend of mine that I should get this game. I kinda just stated that the roster wasn't large enough for a 3v3 game and moved on with my day. Then I kept hearing about how awesome the game was from various sources, including my school's tournament club, until I finally cracked and asked for this game for Christmas. What? I was still being cautious about it. And boy, do I have a lot to say about this one. Let's buckle up and morph our way into Power Rangers Battle for the Grid. Okay, first things first, if you don't want to be spoiled by this extremely simple plot, here's a timestamp to skip to. Our story begins in an alternate timeline where Rita Repulsa is expositing to one Lord Drakon, a man so evil he has Rugal Bernstein's genocide cutter as a move, about how the Power Rangers have been crushed, Zordon being gone, and how he has obtained both the powers of the green power coin and the white light. Drakon then goes on a bit of a tangent about growing up before stabbing Rita and claiming he will finish what they started. Meanwhile, back at the main timeline, Mighty Morphin Red and Mighty Morphin Pink, I would say what their real names are, but I think it will be easier for us all if I say what Rangers they are going through a standard sparring match, with Red Ranger coming out on top. When the Green Ranger arrives and the sparring match continues, this time with the Green Ranger and Pink Ranger teaming up, and after a quick fight defeat the Red Ranger. The Green and Pink Ranger then do one more quick sparring match with the winner getting to choose what movie they go see, when suddenly Lord Drakon shows up with the Rangers being surprised as only those with a power coin may enter the command center, which Drakon laughs off because, as you either already know or have figured out, Drakon is an alternate version of Tommy Oliver, who has never turned back to the good side and defeated the Rangers in their final battle. The Green Ranger takes on Drakon while the Pink Ranger fights two Mastodon sentries. Drakon's soldiers, if you will. Pink succeeds while the Green Ranger is killed by Drakon using the Green Chaos Crystal. What is the Green Chaos Crystal? I have no idea. Not satisfied with that answer? Too bad, expect it to come up often in the summary. Before the Pink Ranger can meet a similar fate, she is saved by Time Force Pink. This is going to be extremely confusing, and I love it. Drakon retreats, and the Green Ranger has one final exchange with the Pink Ranger before passing on. Can I just say it's super weird to hear the word kill and die in something Power Rangers related? It's just something I never would have expected, because normally you hear the word destroy or something like that instead. Back on track. Zordon then exposits how Drakon is using the crystal to freely travel between different eras and dimensions to target Rangers to steal their morphers, in order to gain ultimate power and conquer all existence. Their method of choice being these dragon cannons that can disrupt the Rangers' powers. Afterwards, we get to see various Rangers trying to fight off the invasion, starting with Mystic Force White, who faces off with Sentries and an alternate Goldar. Next we have Mega Force Yellow, and here we are introduced to the Ranger Slayer, an alternate version of Mighty Morphin Pink. The Slayer wins and SPD Cat Ranger attempts to save her. Wait, didn't that Morpher only work for 3 hours or something? Anyways, Drakon shows up, and after a quick fight where Drakon kicks her ass pretty hard, and she is forced to retreat. Magna Defender then proceeds to storm into Drakon's throne room like a badass because he's the goddamn Magna Defender. Drakon takes him on, but after the Defender realizes he's holding back, Drakon sticks some sentries on him. Next up, 2017 movie Blue Ranger or something. I know nothing about this guy, and quite frankly, I don't care. More fighting. Jesus, what is this Mega Force? Blah blah blah. Ranger Slayer shows up. Blah blah blah. Mighty Morphin Red and Pink show up and try to save the day. Pink damages the Ranger Slayer's bow. Wait, that's actually interesting. The Slayer takes movie Blue and leaves. When Time Force Pink and the second Red Samurai Ranger shows up to inform them the Dome City of Corinth is under attack and that Dr. K is developing a method to stop the dragon cannons. Oh right, those things are still a thing. But there's a bit of a problem. There's a 10-mile no teleportation zone around the city, preventing them from just getting her and her tech out. The Rangers then split up, some heading off to Corinth while the others search for surviving Rangers, ending Act 1. Well, that was interesting enough, I guess. A little boring with all the fighting, but it should go up from here now that we have all the pieces in place. Also, Mighty Morphin Yellow now has this massive bulky armor for some reason. I'm 90% sure it's just for the game to have a heavy super armored grappler since the series doesn't really have a ranger that fits the bill. Unless this armor was used somewhere in the show and I don't know about it. I haven't watched Mighty Morphin all the way through yet, although I doubt this was the case. Although skipping ahead a bit, it's mentioned that the armor might have been stolen from Drakon, but that goes nowhere. Although I do have to wonder why it's the Yellow Ranger and not the Blue Ranger. But then again, I wouldn't be surprised if the actor didn't want to come back. I don't know, I never watched the interview. Meanwhile, back at Drakon's HQ, he has the power of the stolen morphers transferred into him, giving him a new powered-up form, with his henchman Finster 5 stating that each team accesses the morphing grid in a slightly different way, warning him not to use more than one morpher per team as it might destabilize his powers and possibly kill him. Back to the fight scenes, the rest of the plot. Cat and Red arrive at Corinth to fend off the invasion. Fight, more fight. Goldar shows up. Fighty fight. Dr. K refuses to leave Corinth because it's the last home of humanity in the RPM universe. Actually, where the hell is Venjix in all this? Not that it really matters. I guess Drakon just dealt with him off screen. Also, when Goldar shows up, it's pretty entertaining as there's a giant Goldar in the background, meaning he cloned himself or something. Blah blah blah. Drakon shows up with some mind-controlled Rangers and the Magna Defender. The Rangers from the other party show up. Wait, where'd Samurai Red go? Drakon kicked their asses? Can't you tell how invested I am right now? Dr. K finally gives, and they remove the teleportation restriction by breaking Corinth's dome. Although I do have to wonder why Venjix never tried that. Then again, maybe the shield was down. The Rangers return to the command center now with the dragon cannons dismantled. You know, those things were pretty worthless to be honest, mostly because we never see the effects personally. Imagine if the dark cannons from the subspace emissary were like that, would we really have any reason to be scared of them? To be fair, those have about 5 years of wind-up, but that's not the point. I know why this was the case, but I'll go into that further down the line. Morphing Red exposes that they up security so Drakon can't get back in. Oh hi, Ranger Slayer. Also, why doesn't he want to get back in? Who knows? Anyways, Morphin Pink takes her on, and after a quick fight, it's revealed that when her bow was damaged in the earlier fight, the control over her was broken. Nice callback to the Sword of Darkness, I guess. Anyway, she then tells her backstory without it being explained. That's what she's doing at all. We just kind of get thrown into the flashback with no context. Joy. She then reveals that Drakon is trying to access the heart of the morphing grid. Wonder what that looks like. I can't wait to see it. She also tells him about this tower he's using in order to weaken dimensional boundaries and power his armies. So the Rangers formulate a plan of attack to confront Drakon once for all, ending Act 2. Holy shit, did that blow. It was nothing but fight scene after fight scene with little to no substance. This honestly reminds me of Grand Blue Fantasy Versus' RPG mode. Minus the charm and intrigue that actually kept me playing that story. Just nothing happens until the very end. Although I will admit I enjoyed the Slayer's backstory, I guess. What little there was. I've spent 2 3/4 pages on this plot summary and I haven't even gone to Act 3 yet. Wonderful. I really want to stop here and get to the gameplay, but...
Unfortunately, I have way too many irons in the old fire to call it a day now.
Finally, Act 3! This one's a bit of a doozy. To put it into perspective, I beat the story in a 2.5 hour sitting. About half of that time is Act 3. Let that sink in. Act 3 took over an hour. Zordon and Kruger head to Rita's palace to recruit her in order to stop Drakon. At first she scoffs at the idea, but changes her tune when Zordon mentions that he killed his Rita. Meanwhile, Morphin Red, now with the Dragon Shield and Dagger, gives all the remaining Rangers a pep talk as they begin their assault on the tower. Fighting, more fighting. Hoard gets punched in the dragon armor. Riveting. Eventually, the spirit of the Magna Defender contacts the current one and... Wait, is that dialogue in the middle of a battle? Why couldn't you have implemented something like that earlier? That would have saved so much time in earlier fights. Whatever. Magna Defender breaks 3. Hooray. Back to the actually interesting shit. Rita and Kruger set up the green candle in Drakon's throne room in order to start draining his powers. Meanwhile, back to the fight. Drakon joins the battle but quickly retreats once he realizes what's going on. And then apparently all of the doors are destroyed off screen. So the team decides to try to use the dragon armor to grow and destroy the tower that way with Morphin Red buying time. Wait, what? Okay, this I can actually accept. Drakon returns to the throne room to find the green candle, Rita, and the Ranger Slayer ready for him. Morphin Yellow grows and destroys the tower, defeating Drakon's army. Drakon and the Slayer's battle continue, with Mighty Morphin Pink joining the fray. They manage to severely wound Drakon, but when Rita goes for the kill, she's attacked by Finster 5, who Drakon then kills. Weakened by the candle in the fight, Drakon attempts to transfer the power in the remaining morphers he has in order to become God, when none other than the Green Ranger confronts them. How is he alive? The Chaos Crystal works in mysterious ways, of course! What a crappy explanation. Also, why didn't they have him become the White Ranger or something? Green states he knows what Drakon saw, as despite Green's protests, Drakon throws the transfer switch and powers up into his final form, and so the final battle begins. During which, Green Ranger explains that in all other universes, his counterparts were good, and he wants to create a world where he's the only one who's not flawed, and blah blah. Can I just enjoy the fight for once, as this one's actually pretty good? Okay, enough enjoying the fight. Green lands a strong hit on Drakon and his powers begin to destabilize, with Green telling him to demorph and that he will help him, with Drakon refusing and explodes, ending the threat he poses once and for all. Zordon thanks to the various Rangers we've seen throughout the game, and Tommy is left to ponder Lord Drakon as a person, with the Slayer and the rest of Morphin Rangers reaffirming that he will never be like him, as he has friends and family, ending Battle for the Grid. You don't even get anything for this. That sucked. Not the story itself, but the mode. The best way I can describe it is wasted potential. I know some of you are saying that it's a fighting game, therefore I shouldn't have even bothered going over the story mode like this. Never mind having it take this long to get through. The story is just a vehicle to have you play more fights, right? So it doesn't even matter. But you're unfortunately listening to a massive BlazBlue fan. Meaning the story of a fighting game can end up being an important part of the package, and this just doesn't live up. As I said, I don't think the plot itself is bad, just the execution. If this was, say, a 3-part episode of the show, I think it would have actually been alright, with the main issue with it being that there was way too much fighting and not enough character interaction. Let me show you a different game that this kinda reminds me of, BlazBlue Cross Tag Battle, in particular that game's first story. Everything is mainly an excuse just to have the characters fight, just like in this game. The main difference is that they put a massive amount of the effort to having the characters interact in the scenes before and after the fights in order to make them more endearing to the player. This is why, despite there not being much of a plot in Cross Tag, I still love the story. The writing is just so charming that it doesn't matter.
As in not my world. An entirely different world than the one I was in a few minutes ago?
Affirmative.
Come on, are you serious? It sounds even worse than a phenomena intervention.
But here there's barely any dialogue worth listening to, which is a shame as I've seen this show before and I know how entertaining the changes between characters can be.
Red is the perfect one, black is the brooding bad boy, green is the clown, and yellow, well, she's the girl. So what are you supposed to be?
I'm Scottish!
Here it's just bare minimum plot progression, and good guys and bad guys constantly saying they're going to beat each other, which is fine for a little bit, but really doesn't go anywhere. They had so many interesting ideas, but none of them are fleshed out. The two biggest examples in my opinion being the Chaos Crystal and the Dragon Cannons, both of which go absolutely nowhere. The crystal is dropped almost instantly, and the cannons, while they do last a little longer, they never really do anything outside of the opening exposition. Now that's not the real issue. The real issue is that there's way too many fights and they take way too long. Now, it's an MVC style game, so you'd think it wouldn't take very long for each fight. Wrong. Or you see, the game loves giving characters extra life bars. This is fine for boss fights like Dragon, but in any other situation, it just makes the fight drag on and on. What makes it even better is that after finishing one of these long fights, you do the same fight with either a new character joining the fray, or just doing the exact same fight from the other side's perspective. Even better when this happens multiple times in the same goddamn fight, with the bare minimum dialogue happening in between. It just never stops. This is at its worst in Act 3, where it's just one big fight scene. And I'm not joking when I said half of my playtime was just this one act. What makes it even better is, as I said way back in the beginning of this review, this game has a tiny roster, meaning you just do the same fights over and over again. I will admit that I did find it interesting that you always play as the winner of the fight, which is pretty cool, although it really wasn't needed at times, as there's the ability to have in-battle dialogue, which only happens twice in the entire game, and the fact that some fights cut off early. Whatever the case, the story does its job as a way to show off all the characters. I could go on, but we're already 6 pages into the review. This mode is just bad. This sucks because once again, there is a lot of potential here. I don't have any sources to confirm this, but it really does come across like this game had a very small budget and very little time to work with. That would actually explain a lot. Actually, before I forget, the story also never explains how everything goes back to normal after Drakon is beaten. Did this whole thing just take place outside the main timeline, or did Time Force fix it, or... I know it's not canon, but you should still explain these things. Alright, now I'm actually done with the story. Okay, now for presentation. It looks... alright. Stages are varied enough, I guess. My favorite being Corinth, as there's a Megazord fight happening in the background. The character models are alright. Kind of what I was expecting from this. Voice acting is also alright, I guess. I've seen the show, so I know the actors can do a lot better, but once again, this is pretty much what I expected. But the thing that really gets to me is that there's barely any music in this game. Every single fight is accompanied by the same goddamn song. Especially in story mode, it gets incredibly grating. It's not like it's a terrible song, just meh, but it plays so often that it started to get on my nerves. Actually, correction here. I messed around with the game again, and there is actually different music for each stage. The problem is it sounds extremely similar, so yeah, we're just going to continue like I said that instead. This was grating to the point that I just started playing other music in the background. Hell, I've been using music from other games throughout this review just so I don't have to listen to it anymore. Really not sure why they couldn't just use music from the show. Also, speaking of story mode, let's talk about how that's told. Most of the time it's just still portraits over a static background, similar to games like BlazBlue, minus the charm that made that work. However, on rare occasions it will use these slideshows with voice acting. These are pretty cool for what they are, and there's only a few of them. Nice change of pace at least. Now let's actually talk about the gameplay. You know, the reason you're actually playing this game. Battle for the Grid is a 3v3 tag team fighting game where you control teams of 3 Power Rangers and a few villains from the various seasons of the show. Each of them having various different playstyles and abilities. I'd go over what everyone does, but that would take way too long, and B, I don't quite know what everyone does. Just from what I've played, most of the basic playstyles are represented. It controls pretty simply, with there being a light, medium, heavy, and special attack button. The chain order being light, medium, heavy, special. You can quick step either forward or backwards by double tapping the control stick in that direction. Jump by pressing up and crouch by holding down. You block by moving backwards. Pretty standard fighting game stuff. You can also perform different attacks by holding a direction and pushing a button. This also applies to special moves. I'll admit I prefer the standard chord circle button method for specials because it gives you more options for them, but for a beginner-friendly game, this is fine. Just not my preference. Each button outside of the special button also have an auto combo attached to them. These are fine. They aren't really that useful for the most part, which is how it should be, in all honesty. You will always rather do a real combo, which for the most part consists of finding the quickest way into your character's launcher, then doing an air combo before relaunching and finishing. Just about every real combo goes this way, but it doesn't really bother me as each of the characters have a different path to said launcher. Gameplay is fairly slow, but in a good way. It gives you a chance to position yourself for combat. You can also throw by pressing medium and heavy together and push block by pressing special when you're blocking. This costs nothing to do, so there's no reason for you not to spam it, so go for it. This is a tag team game, meaning you can call on your other 2 characters as assists by pressing the shoulder buttons, and can tag them in by pressing the button again. Overall, this is a pretty simple way to handle switching characters and is much better than Marvel 3, which this game is clearly inspired by, where you have to hold the button to switch characters. EX specials can be used by spending 1 bar of meter and pressing light and special, and you can perform a super attack by spending 2 bars and pressing heavy and special. Next up is probably the funniest part of this game, the Megazords. That's right, you can call on the power of giant robots to assist you in battle by using them as either a counter or attacking with them. This is quite frankly hilarious, especially with all the jokes aimed at the series about the Rangers not starting with the robot. Overall, the gameplay is really fun, without question the best part of the game. It's a little slow, but once the sparks start flying, it can get pretty fast-paced. The gameplay is definitely best shown in arcade mode. Well, best besides sitting down with a friend, obviously. Where you are pitted against a set of 7 teams of fighters, and here the multiple life bars thing I mentioned back in the stories section is actually used well, as it's only done for boss fights. But there is one tiny bit of a problem. At least in the base version of the game, outside DLC, there's not many characters here. Once again, budget constraints, but out of the 21 characters in the game, currently 9 of them are DLC. I mean, the base game starts off with around 12-ish characters, which is why in story mode I'm pretty sure some of the DLC characters are used. I'd have to double check. Kind of reminds me of Cross-Side Battles Episode 1 story, but not quite as bad as that. When I review Cross-Tag, if I ever do, I will definitely touch on that. This is fixed to a degree with there being a physical version of the game, at least on Switch, and I think there's a bundle on Steam that comes with everything in Season 1 as well as the Red Samurai Ranger. That's something, I guess. Like, this is more of a personal comment, but there are some characters characters who should really be here who aren't, namely RPM Black and Dino Thunder White. I don't know, I just feel like they deserve to be on here more than, I don't know, I guess Mystic Force White. I know that's probably just me. Actually, it kind of makes even less sense that RPM Black isn't here, considering, well, the RPM Rangers are mentioned directly in story. But, once again, most likely has a very small budget, so take what you can get, right? Final thoughts. I know I was very negative throughout this video, but I do genuinely love this game. I'll admit it fails to capture the cheesy charm that makes the show so much fun to watch, and the story mode is pretty bad. But the gameplay is pretty high up there for me. I wouldn't play it over, say, BlazBlue or Guilty Gear, but I would definitely put it over games like Blade Strangers and Grand Blue. It really is baby's first Marvel vs. Capcom, and it's really good at being that. Don't let the fact that it's a licensed game based off a kid's show fool you. This game truly is worth your time if you want to get into fighting games. Am I forgetting something? Oh, right, online! Gonna be honest, I haven't touched this mode at all. This is because my personal views on a game is that it should still be fun even after the online player base dries up. Unless the game is multiplayer only like Dino D-Day, but that's a whole nother story. Basically, if I could still have fun with it years later. Although a friend of mine has told me that it does apparently have rollback, which means it should be pretty good online. And apparently there's crossplay, so enjoy.